a interesting episode of the Working and Tech live stream. Today we're starting 2 minutes late because I almost went down the stream, but I'm excited to be here with my amazing guest Patricia, and we'll dive into who she is in a second and exactly what she does. Um, she's working in a very interesting part of tech as a product project manager, and it's FertilityTech. Someone on Twitter got really excited when I was talking about this earlier today. So I will give you the opportunity to dive straight into it and tell us one how you got here, what inspired you about this role, what you do in the role, and potentially how anyone who's excited about it can get in. I know that's a lot, so let's just start
That
with
that is a
with who
lot.
you are.
Sure. And I'm really excited for the person who's also excited on Twitter to learn a little bit more about fertility tech. My entrance into this industry was a little weird. I started off as a DEI consultant, so that's diversity, equity, inclusion, for those who don't know those acronyms. And I got burnt out. That's the best way to put it. I was working in the field for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And I repeatedly kept expressing my discontent with DEI and how I feel like I'm doing good work, but I don't see it translating in the different community groups or the ERGs or the organizations that we're trying to support. And I was having a conversation with a really good friend at that time. And he said, Patricia, you have all the transferable skills to get into tech like he is. He was a program manager at that time. And I'm like, what is that? I know that everyone's like, oh, tech bro, tech sis, hashtag this, hashtag that, but I didn't really understand what it meant really. And I thought I needed to be a software engineer to get into tech. But he was really generous with his time. He actually offered to teach me all the different methodologies. So that's hybrid, agile, waterfall. But then life circumstances happened for him, and he's just like, okay, I can't teach you anymore, but I can actually refer you to a really great program. And I'm friends with the owner, and he could take it up from there. And he has my highest, what was the words he used? He has my highest recommendation, and that happened to be Skillhat. And as you know, I know that Mo was on this pod a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, Mo, the co-founder of Skillhat, also the CEO. I didn't jump on a call with him. I jumped on a call with one of his learning advisors, and she sold me. She's like, "You have the transferable skills. You're detail oriented. You, of course, you can communicate because you're doing DEI work. I've hosted a lot of workshops at that point, and not my girl. And I was like, okay, let's give it a shot. I have nothing better, nothing to lose really. So I enrolled into the Agile program project management course in April, or was it April cohort in 2022? Um, and within the 11 weeks, I was able to land a new role, which landed me in fertility tech. And do you want me to continue from here, or did you want to stop me and like piece things apart a bit?
I know before we hopped on this, you said that this was your first ever live stream, but I don't think anybody knows that. You're doing amazing, and that's a really good point to end it because I had a lot of questions. One, I think you touched on an area that I'm really passionate about that a lot of people are interested in or that's generated a lot of buzz. But before we get to that, shout out to Toyosi. I think she's showing me a lot of love in the chat. Um, um, and if you're new to the channel, this is Juwan the Techie on YouTube, and this is the Working in Tech live stream. Please leave a like, subscribe. We're always having amazing people like Patricia on the show every week. I think next week we actually have two. It'll
Oh,
always
awesome.
dropping a lot of gems, a lot of knowledge, and I'm really excited to be able to kind of like share this platform and share their knowledge with them as well. Um, so, what were some of the biggest sticking points that you found in your DI work? Because again, it's a hot topic, right, right now, and so I'm definitely curious to kind of like hear about your challenges in the field.
So I went into the field very wide eyed and social justice. I want to make change, and I still want to make change. I'm just doing it a little bit differently now. And because I thought I could make changes in some really big corporations that I worked with through the consulting firms that I was employed by, it was distressing doing qualitative interviews and hearing people's lived experiences. And I thought to myself, there is no way we can fix this burning fire. I I myself, I remember one qualitative interview I did. I won't mention the organization. And after that interview, I cried. I cried
Mm.
for a good 30 minutes because it's not just microaggressions at that point. There people are living through some really difficult situations with their managers, with their superiors, even with their peers that they never really thought about until, what happened in 2020 with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. And that's, I think that's truly what spearheaded DEI and catapulted it to like what it is today. It was because of that. Um, so that's just one instance. And then it was, people typically say it's not until something happens to you that you sort of kind of take notice. And it was for myself, I entered into a stand up meeting, like a normal stand up meetings I have with the different organizations that we support. And the HR manager on the other side of of the Zoom call comes on the call clearly very frustrated. Thank God my camera was off that day because my facial reaction probably would have set her off even more. She comes on the call and she's like, I'm so tired of Black Lives Matter. And, there's so many other organizations that's doing incredible work. And, do you even know what Asian Heritage Month is? And I'm like, whoa, okay, this is a lot. I'm in a junior role at this point. So I'm looking to my superior, who's my partner and my colleague, to essentially live allyship. Like, this is your moment to shine and to really put to action what we preach about. Allyship is a verb, right? That did not happen. That did not happen. It was more quiet than I've ever imagined. And that's silence also speaks, silence echoes. And I left that call. She pulled me into another call and she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that that happened, but HR managers, they go through a lot in their day-to-day." And I was like, "Okay." She's like, "Yeah, but you know that we're still doing really great work and this organization is really committed to DEI." I'm like, "Okay, I believe you. All right. What else did you want me?" I think she really wanted me to say, "It's okay that you didn't say anything." And I was not going to give her that.
Mm.
So it's
So
those things that kind of led me to burning out in the industry.
in the role,
Yeah.
because and from your view, and I think that that's something that I do feel a lot for and like have a lot of sympathy for because there's so many times, and I think like they always say this like it's always great to get a fresh pair of eyes in most teams, like so for example you can see challenges that people don't see, or you're bringing like a fresh perspective. And that can get you really excited, but you can learn very quickly in those positions that those fresh perspectives might not really count for much, right? It might not change a lot. And
Hmm.
oftentimes that leads to a lot of frustration because, like, you're coming in, you see, like, a very easy path. Like, we're trying to do A and B. Like, why can't we just do it and get to C, right? But
Hmm.
then you realize that it's always more complicated, right? So, in your opinion, like, just being in that role, being in that organization, what do you think is holding back, most organizations from like reaching those ideals?
I think a lot of organizations are very comfortable and they don't want to be uncomfortable. I think a lot of organizations have just done things the old fashioned way. And DEI is a very scary term to people who have gotten away with a lot of harm
Mm,
just passively. So when they hire DEI experts, they're not hiring us, I think, personally, from just my little stint in this industry, they're not really hiring us to make tangible changes. I think they're hiring us to check a box, truly. And they live up to that expectation because now they can put our logo on their page and say that they're committed to DEI efforts. But in reality, that's the complete opposite.
Mm.
Um, Now, if you ask me what do organizations really need to do to live and practice what they preach, for lack of a better word, ooh, I hope this doesn't become a soundbite, but I hope this doesn't become a soundbite. But I think they need to bring it in-house. I don't think they should be doing outside consulting agencies to come in. And you are right in the sense where we bring a fresh perspective. We're from the outside looking in, and we can truly pinpoint different areas that need support or different areas that are lacking. But I've found with those qualitative interviews that I did was a lot of the people on ground know more than we do. And they know how to circumvent the different conversations that need to happen to take what we're trying to provide them to the next level.
Mm.
So I think if they empowered their employees and empower their ERGs to actually make tangible differences, I think that's going to have more of a lasting impact than just hiring a consulting agency for 1 year and then you have to retain them for another year. And then you may just drop it all together and say, well, I've done my part. We are DEI certified.
Compliant.
We are compliant. So, yeah, it's really about empowering people on ground, boots on ground, employees to champion the cause because otherwise we can only do as much as what our contract stipulates.
Mm. And I imagine that that also comes with the added pressure of like trying to get that renewal like next year. So when
You can't
someone doesn't kind of like jump in front of the proverbial bullet, there's probably a reason why, right?
yeah, you can't ruffle, especially when you're an outside consulting agency. You try to ruffle feathers in a good way, but you can't ruffle the actual feathers that you need to make the tangible changes because you are looking for that renewal at the end of the year. And if, let's say, the sponsors, the stakeholders or the sponsors for the DEI project think that you're doing too much, they will find another agency that will do the same work but with a tighter lip. So, yeah.
Mm. Almost like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
You trying to make a change without, getting changed yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
um, so it's interesting because I think one theme that I've just seen in your career so far is like you have such a huge heart, right? Like you went into like a huge problem space to try to solve that, and now you're solving another one in like another huge space that is a big challenge for a lot of people. And but before we kind of like go there, first of all, you got to go get the skills, right?
Hmm.
And you were talking a little bit like about how you navigated that journey, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why many of the people who come to the live stream actually come here to learn from that. So I want to kind of like double click into that experience. The biggest challenge that I've seen, even in my own journey, right, trying to get into tech, was, it's so funny. Like everybody says that like you think that you have to write code or become a software engineer to really work in tech. That's like the biggest number one misconception. Uh, but I think it becomes a lot easier, first of all, once you kind of like peel off that layer, because you then start to see the possibilities. But that's not the hardest part, right? The hardest part is actually, one, believing that you belong and going to get the skills that really kind of like help you make that transition. So can you talk me through a little bit about what that journey would look like for you?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I have really good friends. I gotta shout them out because if that person didn't say, Patricia, you need to get into tech ASAP, like you're wasting your talents in DEI for lack of a better word, I wouldn't have even considered tech or what I'm currently doing right now, to be quite honest. But because he was unable to help me, he sort of pivoted me or showed me another avenue, and that was through Skillhat. And I do think that today is Mo's birthday, so happy birthday, Mo, if you're watching this. Um, and Skillhat was great. It was 11 weeks. I learned all different all the different methodologies. So agile, waterfall, hybrid, and then we also had quizzes and tests. But I knew by week 3, because I come from a DI background, maybe I was a little bit overly confident with my interviewing skills, that I'm going to start applying. So by week 3, week 4 into the course, which is 11 weeks, I already started sending out my resume. I already changed my roles. I changed all of my duties in my DEI consulting role and put them into like project. Like the verbiage I used was very much, this was the impact, this is what I was able to do, this is it, and then I impacted in this way, and I added percentages, made up a little bit of percentages. Don't do that, people. But I was trying to showcase the value that I was able to provide to these organizations while I was doing my consulting work in DEI. And I got to tell you, I may be, I made it through a lot of first rounds. So I got a lot of first telephone interviews that transitioned into Zoom interviews, Google Meets, but I never got an actual offer. I always got the, so sorry, we went with an internal candidate. We love your profile. We love your enthusiasm, but we're looking for someone who has just a little bit more skills, like more technical skills, whether that's Smartsheet or Jira or um, I think they also mentioned Microsoft Project at one point. I'm like, okay, Patricia, time to buckle down into this Skillhat course and learn as much as you can. And my course mates would tell you during my cohort, my hand was always up. I was always talking. I was always trying to understand things to the best of my ability because, yes, I paid for this course, but I really want to get the most out of this course. And that looks like, for me, dedicating my time to studying. So I did a lot of independent study. I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I think I even purchased a Udemy course because I wanted to supplement my learning. And I was just trying to absorb as much information as possible because Skillhat is great as that blanket course that you can take to just understand all the different methodologies, but you also have to put it into practice in a way. And I'm also one of that. I am that friend that always plans events, outings, group trips. I travel a lot, so I plan itineraries. So I try to mold that into the way that I was communicating in interviews because that was the only way that I knew how. Fast forward, do I talk about how I landed this current role? Because I'm still
Yes,
in the
please.
in
Go
this.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so fast forward, I decided to go about creating a link, an Indeed profile where you can just post your resume, add a picture if you wanted to, um, just some specific details as to what you're looking for in a role. And I just made that profile, but I continued to apply on LinkedIn. The current company that I work for found me on Indeed, set up a phone screening. So they found me on a Thursday on Indeed. By Tuesday, I had a phone screening. By that Thursday, I was talking to the CEO, the project leader, and I forgot the third person on that call. By the Friday, so the next day, I had an offer.
Let's go.
And but the thing is, during that second call, the CEO told me that she felt psychologically safe while I was speaking to her. And I'm like, I've never heard this on an interview. Should I say thank you? I know what psychological safety is, of course, but that was new to me, that the way that, the way you communicate to people really does resonate with them beyond just the scope of work. And it was, I say it's grace, truly, that they found me. Screening went really well, conversation went really well, and then I had an offer, and I texted Mo immediately when I got the offer, and he was super proud because it was less than a month after I finished the program. But a part of me was just like, I can negotiate, but I want to kind of do it by myself. Mo has spoken extensively about negotiating, and I listened to a lot of those talks that he had about the power of negotiating, but I wanted to put it to practice myself. So I was able to negotiate my salary with like a 10K increase from what they offered me. And I felt super proud of myself because I was much more than what I was making in DEI. So yeah, pat on the back for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think on the stream right now, we're all to see, right? I almost want to shout, "That's my girl," too, because you drop so many gems in that. I don't know if it's 3 4 minute periods that I feel like a lot of people need to write down. There's so many models that I've seen work in tech, and you've broken it all down. And I don't know that you probably realize that you've done what you've done. One thing that I say to a lot of people is if you wait till you're ready, you'll never be ready.
Mm,
Um, if you're trying to transition into tech, start applying right away.
yep.
The reason is very simple. Even the journey to getting that job is a learning process, just like the course or program or whatever else that you're taking. By the time you send out a bunch of resumes, you kind of like get into this like self introspection mode where you say, you know what, I'm not sure that that line really works. I'm not sure that this really sells my skills the best way. Let me change it. That process itself gets you closer to that ideal.
Hmm.
As you also interview, you start to see gaps very quickly from the people who matter. Those are the employers, those are the recruiters, those are the hiring managers telling you specifically what they're looking for. And that narrows your focus, right? In terms of like what, because if you go through anything, there's maybe like a list of 100 things that you can learn about AI, product management, this and that, like data management. All of those things kind of like nibble at you. But
Mm,
once you're in 2 3 different interviews and everybody says we need some kind of like experience with project management tooling, right? Then that kind of like narrows the focus. It's like, you know what? Maybe I go spend 30 minutes and just go watch this YouTube video to kind of like get familiar with it. And the more you do that, the closer you get to landing that role. Even like when you go talk to like maybe potential mentors, or like you had in your own case, you literally had an entire support network wrapped around you that you could literally reach out to for negotiating advice and things like that.
hmm.
You have specific things that you're asking them, because that's another key. It's that one, if you have mentors, use them for things that you can't easily Google, right? So
Yeah.
for example, like you might get generic advice when you look, how to Google, but when you're in that moment, it's real pressure. You don't want to go ask for a ridiculous number that makes you lose the job offer completely, right? Because there's a way that you can also take off an employer where they're looking like, is she real? Like I
Yeah.
just saw that, felt safe, and now she's doing this to me, like with a request. So it's even navigating. It's not maybe even all just about the money, but even the spirit of negotiating, like being able to still come in and say, you know what, I love this project, but I was hoping we could work around, this number. And you can find a lot of damaging advice online that basically tells you to go the ego way and say, you know what, this is what I deserve, and
Mhm.
nothing else. It
Just
doesn't work.
throw out a ridiculous number that you can't even really live up to if we really think to ourselves and what we're capable of doing. And that takes a lot of introspection as well.
Yeah, and so like you drop so many gems there. It's mind blowing. And the last one I really want to touch on is, what I'd said initially. Like, it comes across very quickly that you have a huge heart, and like you're carrying that into kind of like all the roles. It's the reason why you got burnt out in the first place, right? And that comes through because you don't need to kind of like be a genius to see that you're working in a passion role. At the very least, like something that requires you to go beyond skills, that requires you to go beyond just technical understanding. You have to have a sympathy for the moment, and for the CEO to be able to quickly recognize that that's something you can't pay for. That's something you can't learn. You can't basically go pay for a course and say, "Give me a bigger heart." Like it doesn't work that
That's
way.
true.
That already has
That's
to kind of
true.
like be in there, right? So, and that's a big thing that a lot of people overlook too. It's that, of course, you like I literally shared a tweet today about going to this meetup where people were they had kind of like been part of like this training program, and they were all product people, and I didn't know that these people were extremely senior, right? So I'm there, I'm saying, oh, product, okay, so we're chopping it up. And then when we started to share LinkedIn's, I'm seeing directors and VPs. I'm like, whoa.
Oh.
And that's the thing, like it really hit me because it's like people are always learning regardless of the level they're in their career, because that's how they got there in the first place, right? So why
Hmm.
would they stop even when they reach those heights? And that teaches me. So but no matter how much you're learning, no matter how much you're growing, there's still something that's in it to you that would make you successful in a role. Like we all have our different individual traits that help us be successful. I remember speaking to someone maybe just maybe 2 weeks ago that was saying something around like, when they worked in a specific business and risk, that they had a specific teammate who would look at a system and say, I wonder if someone did this and this and that, would they get this outcome? And she's like, I would never think of that, right? And like that, having that adversarial mindset helps them be the perfect candidate in that role. Beyond whatever other like training they stack on top of that, there's that
Mhm.
natural um just their innate abilities. And I think you bring that, into your work, and that's kind of like helping you be successful.
Yeah, I know now. When I first entered I guess when I first graduated undergrad, I had big aspirations. I was armed with a sociology degree and a minor in disaster emergency management. Please don't ask me what that is because I can't even tell you. And I thought that I was going to be changing the world. I was very empowered, and I still want to do that. It just looks a little differently now. And I want to have a career where I'm still making really great impact, but still getting paid for my work. Because it was easy for me to try to transition to nonprofit work, but I knew I probably would have gone just as quickly as I was burnt out in DEI if I had gone the nonprofit route. So this was literally a blessing. I call it grace. What I currently do, and I enjoy what I do. The impact that I'm able to have every single day is really fulfilling for me personally.
That is so amazing. That is so amazing. I'm very curious about what you do in your current role, because again, a lot of people are fascinated, as I mentioned earlier. So, tell us about the company. Tell us about your role, and because I'm really curious, like fertility tech. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So, wow. So I think the best place to start is just what is art. So, art is assisted reproductive technologies, and that's the industry that I'm in. And what we do is we focus on different third party reproduction methods for people who want to have children. So, whether they're using a sperm donor, an egg donor, or they're doing IVF or IUI, in vitro fertilization, for those who don't know what IVF is. But the company that I work for specifically is called Egg Bank Canada, and it's the first egg bank in Canada that received Health Canada approval, and I was a part of that process, which is really cool to see. There's Thanks. There was a lot of egg banks in the US. I think hundreds and thousands exist, but we are the first, which also puts a lot of pressure for what I do. And what we do is we have donors, incredible donors who decide to donate their eggs, whether they're from 19 to 35. They're able to donate their eggs. They will get reimbursed for any sort of expenses they incurred within the 2 months that they are going through the donation process. And from their donation, we're able to sell those high quality great eggs to intended parents, so people who are looking for an egg donor who unfortunately aren't able to conceive with their own egg. So that's for women.
Hmm.
And then sperm banks kind of operate the same way for men. If your sperm unfortunately isn't, you're not able to conceive due to different medical reasons. So yeah, that's what I do. I am I guess, the lead now for Egg Bank Canada. I'm about to clock 2 years in about 2 months, which is really exciting. And we've had a lot of different micro projects that got us to where we are now, but it's currently evolving. There's so many intended parents who are now looking for eggs within Canada and the US. We just got FDA approval, so that opens a wide network for us in the US to sell eggs and help people build their families, really. Yeah, so that's what I do.
That is so amazing. And given that you guys are a tech company, because I imagine that, a lot of this processes themselves already like well established, but I imagine that you guys bring a lot of like value add into it, giving, first of all, like the way in which you guys approach it from like being a health tech company, but also like being like very new into the industry, you probably bring a lot of disruption with that. What are some ways that, you do that?
Ooh, I think our team is truly speaks for itself. Like I come from a DEI background, and I'm talking to because we outsource a lot of the tech components of our company. So whether that has to do with like our database, so we have a company that a vendor that I communicate with, I should say, I communicate with them to make any changes that we need to the database or to our website and so and so. But I think the true innovation for EBC lies within our team. Our team is there's someone who's donated her eggs 12 times who works as a donor support, and she's able to like bring a really empathetic feel when she's talking to donors. There's me who did DEI, and I'm able to talk about, there's inequalities and gaps that exist for people even being able to afford these sorts of treatments. My manager has been a surrogate, I think she said 6 times. So she's really committed such a selfless act for so many different families. So I think it's our true innovation lies within our team and like the
Mhm.
experiences that we bring into EBC and how we're able to translate our lived experiences into the families that we hope to support.
That's amazing. And what are some of the projects? Because you mentioned like this kind of like, whether it's getting approval, being the first, like all of those different projects have brought those to life. What are some that are most exciting to you? And maybe kind of like a segue, what were some of the things that you had in your learning stages at Skillhat that maybe helped you be able to be maybe a more valuable member of that, project team, or kind of like bring your skills kind of like to bear?
Yeah, so it was a little different for me coming into this field because I had no idea beyond IVF. I didn't really know what art was. And Skillhat explained to me that as a project manager, I manage people, money, time, resources. So it's because I always remember that I was able to zero in on the key components that I needed to focus on to execute the different projects. So whether that's creating the schedule for the project or liaisoning with the stakeholders to make sure that the scope, like we stay in scope, because with something as big as creating an egg bank and a functional egg bank that's not only Health Canada compliant but FDA compliant, there's a lot of, I want to say, whimsical ideas as to let's make it bigger, let's do this. I'm like, let's bring it back. Let's try to systematically work towards like our overarching goal for this program. And that there were so many different mini projects. I don't even know where to begin. Even getting the Health Canada approval, that was like a team within itself focusing on that. And at the same time, we were working on the website. At the same time, we were recruiting donors. At the same time, we were liaisoning with intended parents. So there were so many things going on. And I was a part of each of those discussions within my first year, as well as because my company wanted me to be able to speak about art in a way that makes logical sense, they flew me to different conferences. So I went to 6 conferences in the span of 2 years, which was paid for by them, like airfare, food, accommodations. And I was literally knee deep talking to embryologists, physicians, geneticists, OBGYNs. I was like, whoa, this is really, I'm in the thick of it. I'm listening to these people talk about reproductive health in a way that I never thought about for myself before. So, yeah.
That is so amazing. That is so cool. Um, so I think one of the things that kind of like jumped at me in you saying that is also the fact that you're having to learn very quickly. Because again, you bring the functional skills, but because that's something also that I don't think a lot of people pay attention to, is the fact that aside from the let's say you're a project manager, project management skills are just a baseline. You still have to go and get domain or industry knowledge. So if you work in health tech, for example, you have to understand that industry, or you work in the financial industry, you have to kind of like understand the nuances, regulations, compliance, fraud and risk, those type of things, right?
Hmm.
And I imagine like, conferences are one of the ways that you're bridging that knowledge gap. whilst also like, advocating for your company and building just more awareness in general, right? So what are some of the ways that you quickly kind of like close that gap from a industry knowledge perspective?
Yeah, so I became a member for ASRM. If you ask me what the acronym stands for, ooh, yeah, ASRM and CFAS, because we use acronyms so frequently that I may have to just Google what it stands for fully. But because I became a member of those governing organizations, I was able to do a lot of their different workshops and in services. And because we work with a lot of fertility clinics within, well, we work with a particular, right now with a particular fertility clinic in Toronto, I was able to be a fly on the wall in a lot of those conversations with how the physician talks to patients or with how nurses talk to donors. The clinic manager essentially became my mentor in a way. We developed such a close bond, and she's kind of taken me under her wing, and I know she's watching right now, but she won't comment. But yeah, that has helped me bridge the knowledge gap to understanding art and being able to talk to people about what I do and what EBC offers to both donors and people who are looking to purchase eggs.
Something that you've kind of like touched on as a theme, but maybe not necessarily highlighted is one, how you had a friend who told you to get out of a role and go to a different role. And then when they couldn't really support you directly anymore, they referred you into a program. And then, these people on the other side now supporting you, watching your live stream outside of the workspace, mentoring you, supporting you, just shows like the value of building relationships and how that can take you far, right?
Hmm.
Is that something that you paid specific attention to? One, and then two, what are some of the things that has been helpful in you building like this really effective relationships?
Yeah, I like to say that building relationships comes from a place of being genuine with people. I think when you're genuine with and you're very intentional in friendships or relationship building, it truly does show. Um, and also, I think you can really spot when someone's trying to use you to their end goal. So, the way I've always approached any sort of relationships, whether that's working or friend, is what can I do to help you? And then in turn, that kind of opens a door for them to see me beyond someone who's just asking them to do another thing on their to-do list. Because it gets really crazy, not only in the clinic, but with EBC, where everyone has so many things on their to-do list that I don't want to be another to-do list, whether that be for my friend or for my colleagues. I want to be able to provide value to people, and I want to be a value add. That's the way I always think about when I'm trying to establish a friendship with someone or a collegial relationship. So that would be my tip. If you're asking for a tip, just lead with intentionality, be very genuine, because we can sniff out users and people who just want to take, and not give back. So always be reciprocal with your giving.
Okay, we got the soundbite, guys. Everyone has a to-do list. Don't be another item on
I
that
don't
to-do
know.
list. Amazing, amazing. That's a beautiful takeaway because I definitely see like especially and it's most important like I think which is okay. That would be my next question because you are touching on another thing very important and kind of like that. I feel like that highlight of this show today, which was kind of like that journey. Um, Having the baseline, whether you're self-studying, I personally prefer like going to a program for many reasons. One is that you're able to learn the concepts, but you're also able to learn it within a community, and then you're able to have support of the professionals. But
Mm,
you touched on one thing, it's that you understand that that's just the baseline. No matter how great that program is, you have to do that final legwork. Because ultimately, I think one of the things that I realize in tech, in many of the different roles that I've been in, is that your career growth is your personal responsibility. Like no matter how companies tell you that, we're here to support you, we will do this, we'll do that. If you don't want to grow yourself, nobody can force that on you because growth is uncomfortable most times, right?
Yeah.
So you have to go out and do that work and show that, I deserved it. I want to have it. Let's go. So you kind of like, I see that already, right? You go in third week and then getting a job on the other end. And I know, for example, even from the story you shared, it almost felt like you felt you weren't ready, but you wouldn't have gotten that opportunity 1 month down the line if you hadn't done that initial work. Because
Work, yeah.
regardless of it, you still would have gotten those no's. You would have still have gotten all those things. So it was better to get it out of the way early. But kind of like to double click back into that, how important has it been in your career to go ahead and do the work yourself, not wait for that um, that direction or that guidance or that permission, even, right? But just to say, you know what, I already see it. I have the vision that this is where I want to go, or this is what I want to achieve, and this is what it's going to take me to get there.
Yeah, gosh, I would say it's really important. We really are, I believe in God. So I won't say I'm the captain of my own ship, but I think my faith plays a really big part in what I do and how I move. Like I move with so much confidence that you would think that I'm the prime minister of Canada. And it's that audaciousness that I think people need to start believe in themselves, and that'll translate into the way that they communicate with people. Also adding in with intentionality and just being genuine, because I also think that plays a key role. But if you're not confident in your own abilities in the work that you hope to do, how can you believe that someone else is confident in your ability to execute the work in the way that it needs to be done? So if I can't speak to the fact that I don't know art, all I know is IVF, but I'm really passionate about, helping people. I want to make some sort of change in this world. I want to leave some sort of impact. I have all these technical skills that I've gained in this program. And if I wasn't able to translate those three things during my interview, I don't think I would have gotten the role. And it's also because I was very open to learning. I was open to saying, I don't know everything, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to put in the work necessary to make sure that I'm able to speak to the teams that I need to speak to the physicians and the embryologists and or whomever I need to make sure that the work gets completed and this program becomes successful. I'm your girl. I'm your go-getter. I'm your self-starter. And I've always been that way. So I think as long as you have that confidence in yourself, it will truly translate into any role that you decide to go for. And you also have to kind of enjoy the work you're doing. I know a lot of people now want to go into tech just for the money. And I mean, the money's nice, the money's great. Please don't stop because the money is good, okay? But at the same time, do you even like being a project manager? Do you even find fulfillment leading teams? Do you like doing daily stand-ups? Do you like doing check-ins? Or are you more reserved? Do you want to be very into yourself and not really communicate with other people? Because if you're very reserved and you don't feel comfortable even having a one-on-one conversation with someone, project management may not be your jam. So it's also recognizing your own strengths, also identifying your weaknesses and leaning more towards your strengths, but also still working on your weaknesses. Because if you want to continue to move up the ladder, whatever that looks like, whether that's in a technical role or a support role, you need to identify your weaknesses and work towards it not no longer being a weakness of yours and it translating into a strength, if
Mm,
that makes sense.
that definitely makes a lot of sense. Um, Again, if you're just joining us, this is the Working in Tech live stream. I'm sorry you've missed a lot because Patricia's been dropping so many gems. You're gonna have to watch this back. Um, but in the next, 20 minutes or so that we have left on the live stream, you're gonna have a chance to ask your questions. So drop them in the chat, and then we'll take them one after the other. And then don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel because why would you want to hoard it? You heard us say it, be intentional and be generous. So be generous to your friends. Share the live stream. Let them learn to, and then get that tech bag. Again, like you said, it's okay to want the bag, but also be passionate. But if you just want the bag, hey, who am I to judge, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think our first question from Trey is actually about the bag. So how can I get better at interviewing and salary negotiation?
Wow, that's a great question. My initial thought is to say that I really finessed my way through my salary negotiation, but if I was to redo it now, I would list out the ways in which I've already, well, can I answer this in two ways? I'll answer
Feel free.
it. The first way is when you're still in the interview process and you're trying to, and you've gone to the end and they've given you an offer. I think the best way you can go about it is to go back to the job posting, go back to what the key job descriptions or the key role identifying marks that they're looking for, and send an email tailored to that role or that position and say, I have executed X, Y, and Z this, I've done this, I know that the salary range is this, my expectations falls into the same bracket. Don't go beyond the
Overshoot.
bracket, don't overachieve, but go towards the tail end of it and say that based off of what you've shared and the great interview that you've had with X, Y, and Z, I know that I can bring this to the table and this is what I'm looking for. Some people are going to say that's too much work, that's too much back and forth. But once again, it ties back to how you were able to, they wouldn't have offered you the role if they didn't want you. So
Mhm.
what do you really have to lose by going back and reinforcing that you are the best candidate and you've done all these different things and you want this salary based off of what you've achieved and what you're going to be able to bring to the role? Does that make sense, Troy? So
It,
that would
it,
be my
ma- it
first.
makes it makes sense. Yeah.
That would be my first one. Now, if you're already in a role like me and now you're asking for a raise, I did ask for a raise. I asked for a raise 5 months ago, and I got the raise. So now I guess we'll get to that. But how did I go about it? I just scheduled the meeting with my immediate manager, and it was around the same time as my performance review. And she was asking me what what have I done so far? And I've stated this is how I've been able to manage and lead the teams to X, Y, and Z roles. These are the metrics that I was using, as you could see on XYZ Excel sheet. And she's like, okay, so what are you hoping? Like, what is your salary expectation at this point? And I told her based off of health tech and fertility tech specifically, which is growing, it's almost a $60 billion industry. There's so much potential with what EBC is doing that I can't settle for what I know that I could actually get from this role. And she took it up and they met me where I wanted them to meet me. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Exactly where you wanted them to meet you. That's
exactly where I wanted them to
amazing.
meet me. Yep,
That's amazing. That's amazing. It's definitely great to work for a company that kind of like takes care of you. It gives you extra motivation to go do the work.
for sure.
Um, and then the next question we have is from Janine. I think you had kind of like touched on that. It's like if you're a project manager, if you're an introvert, maybe you don't necessarily go to being a project manager. So the question is, what are some tech jobs that are good fits for introverts?
For introverts. Oh, that's a great question, Janine. I would say what are your key skills? Are you good at design? Because then I would say go the UI UX route. Or are you good at coding? Then you could be a software engineer or a software developer or software advocate. I think they have that as well. Um, Even with it kind of takes a more extroverted personality. So that's a great question. How would you
You
answer
have to be
this?
willing to be in meetings.
Yeah, regardless, you would have to be willing to be in meetings. Hmm. 'Cause, 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 You know, I also know that, well, graphic design also takes some technical skills as well, but there's also branding. You don't necessarily have to be, you could be a part of the branding team. You don't have to be the branding lead. So if you're, once again, you're good with speaking to audiences and creating engaging content or visuals, or sorry, you can even be a content writer in tech. You could be a you could be a technical writer. You can be a technical writer for us. I'm not sure if we're really hiring for the role, but that's also that's also something that introverts can do as well. Do you have any
Right.
suggestions for Janine?
I think you've mostly covered them. The only maybe other one that I would throw in there is probably like data analytics or data engineering. I
Mm,
think the way to think about it is like you have to be one of the two. It's almost hard to kind of like succeed without the other. So if you're really great at communicating, bringing people together, then you got to like lean towards those roles, product, project, program. um, in those things like it's meetings, getting out for people. You have to like that, but some people don't, and then it means like you kind of like stay in front of your computer more. You're writing, you're designing, you're coding, those type of things. I think that's kind of like or maybe even cybersecurity, right? That's another role
right.
where you
Yeah.
may not necessarily need to be
Front facing.
front facing, but either way, like I think you have to be in one of those two buckets, unfortunately. So you have to be a bit more technical if you don't want to deal with people.
Yeah. I think I'd rather deal with people than be technical.
Yeah, and I think that that's the beautiful thing too. It's like you people naturally have those propensities, right? Like it's very clear, like in your degree, in the works you've done, that you get energized, and I'm exactly the same way, right? Like our stories are even identical in the sense that I also had a very like big fixation in terms of like to be in tech you have to be a software engineer, which I found out wasn't true. And now like I've mostly been in like product entrepreneurial roles and similar. So and I think it's worked out so well so far anyway. So I'm getting a bit more technical now. That's the interesting part, but not still as
Oh,
technical. I'm in a solution architect role now, which requires me to kind of like do like diagramming, but a lot of it is still like gathering requirements, kind of like aligning stakeholders, those type of things. But it's kind of like getting a bit more technical too.
wow. Hopefully one day I'll be a bit more technical, but I don't think I need it yet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's also like because I realized and I made the decision because I just kind of like started to see the trend a bit more in terms of um, AI. AI uses data. Data is now stored in the cloud, right? So I kind of like start to make those inferences. I'm like, I wonder if I start to look for more roles at intersection of like cloud and data, and that's kind of like where I'm at now, being a solution architect. So the big part of that is just understanding like the different systems. So for you to architect a solution, and in a sense, if you actually really take it down to the bare bones, right, it's still mostly project management. The only
Mm,
difference now is instead of learning about like the clinics and like the providers and all those different things, I'm learning about backend systems and stuff. I'm still not writing any code, right? But it's just like I understand that, for example, if we're trying to maybe start a data process, so maybe we're having a pub sub, topics, ingressing, all of those different like technical terms. That's just all it is. But it's still at the core of it. It's still kind of like understand how something goes from beginning to the end.
mm. Yeah,
So
when you started dropping technical stuff, I'm like, Juwan, yes, yes.
trust me, that's how I felt for the most part. And I'm still very new in this role. Like I'm even less than 2 months. So that's the same way I get. Like, oh my god. But I feel like the more you kind of like play around with it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You're definitely right.
So our next question: Hi, Patricia. What does a typical day at work look like for you?
Ooh, you mean when I'm not putting out fires? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. My boss is gonna see this. Um,
what does typical mean?
what does typical mean? So what I typically do, so even for today, before I signed off, before I joined this incredible live stream, I typically have a list of to-dos, like a revolving around of list of to-dos that I need to complete. And sometimes it's a week long's worth of to-dos that spans from 3 weeks prior that I just haven't gotten to. So I'll add to my to-do list and I'll check off the things that I've already done. But if you look at my schedule, my calendar, it's mostly meetings. Like I'm in meetings, I want to say 70% of the day. And then for the remaining third, I'd say 20% I'm responding to emails and making sure that things are moving that the way it needs to be, that needs to move and progressing. And then for the remaining 10, I'll do a little bit more self-care. Like I'll actually turn off my laptop, I'll go for a walk, I'll eat lunch if I have time, and then I come back into meetings, back into making sure that things are moving, putting out any fires that happened while I was, taking my leisure walk. um yeah, it's mostly communication. That's what a typical day at work looks like for me. Whether I'm communicating on Teams or I'm responding via email.
Mm, that's that's another thing that I really like. It's that finding that break within the day because it almost feels like you're starting a brand new day as well. And walking is definitely very useful because it kind of like just helps you clear your head and like refocus. And because oftentimes like you get caught up in the weeds that you can get a little jaded. So it
Mm-hmm.
definitely does help to kind of like get away and then get back in.
Come back in, yeah.
So one of the things that because I work in like a highly regulated industry now, and I think that you kind of like work in the same space. What are the differences from working in DEI, where I think like you just generally have more leeway and you're setting the tone versus working in a place where you're dealing with like the FDA and regulatory bodies in Canada and like just kind of like getting familiar with the policies and things like that. How does what was kind of like the mind shift that needed to occur?
Well, first, I will say that I'm more of a fan of regulations than something that's not regulated at all. And I'll tell you why. When you know what confinements you're able to work in, you're actually able to do your job much better.
Mm,
And that's just from my experience working in DEI because it's not a regulated industry. There's no government governing body. I know there's like different communities that say that they are the I don't know, organization for Canada or for the US or for the UK, but there's no intervention really from any government agency like that, um, whether that's federal or local or state. Unless you're working in DEI within a school, then maybe you'll have some sort of regulations that you kind of have to stay within some sort of confinement. So transitioning from that to now having an entire textbook, and it's in my office because I also have an office space downtown Toronto, having I think it's 1,000 pages worth of do's and do nots for Health Canada. And now that we are also FDA compliant, I also have to understand what those overlaps are because there's a lot of overlaps within art for Health Canada and FDA. But FDA is a little bit more specific. Like they like certain things to occur in a specific ways. So, for example, we have a labeling system for once the the egg donor does her retrieval. That labeling system goes into the cryo tank where we freeze the eggs. Now, if we want to ship those eggs to the US, we actually can't use that same label. So that label can only exist within Canada. But by the time it tries to go into transition to the US, we need to give it an entirely different label. And
mm,
that's because the FDA is very specific about what the labeling looks like. Now, you could probably say, why don't we just change our labels to what the FDA wants because there's that many overlaps? It's not that easy. It's not that easy. I wish it was, but it really isn't. And SOPs exist for a reason. It's not like I could just change the entire SOP for what we're already doing. But I like the fact that I know what I can do within the confinements that exist within Health Canada and FDA. I think if there was a lot of ambiguity with even donors' rights,
Mhm.
people could just pay donors and mistreat them, and do whatever they want to them. But Health Canada is very specific. You cannot pay a donor. Like, all they can get is reimbursement up to a certain amount. And then they even list out the types of reimbursements that are acceptable. So that brings me comfort, especially when I'm talking to someone who wants to be an egg donor, or when I'm talking to the intake team as they're navigating conversations with donors, that we are working within those confinements and making sure that we're giving the correct information.
That is so amazing, and I think, to be honest, like I've naturally preferred like non-regulated industries because I feel like, I'm just able to get more creative and just do my work. Also, I'm an entrepreneur, kind of like a rebel, so that makes sense. But as someone who works in a regulated space now, I definitely agree with that. I think it's very important to kind of like learn those rules so that you can
Mm-hmm.
kind of like get creative with them, or at least see opportunities. Because even in regulation, I think there's still opportunities to be creative. You just have to get really good at understanding exactly, why things are the way they are, and like figure out like, ways to kind of like either sometimes like layer whatever you're doing on top of them, or figure out other ways to kind of like do what you need to do.
Definitely, definitely.
So I see the word time. And this is kind of like the place where we typically end it. I don't know if you have any shout outs, any last words of advice, whatever that is. I think this is kind of like the moment.
Yeah. Well, once again, shout out to Mo. Happy birthday. Thank you for creating Skillhat, because I truly think it changed my life for the better. And I'm in a opportunity that I love. I created the Black Fertility Journal to help Black folks understand their fertility a bit more. So if you want to understand your fertility, whether you're a man or a woman or someone in between, feel free to get in contact with us. We have some really great opportunities coming up for people who want to take testing on their own time and see what their fertility yields. And thank you, Joanne, for having me. Thank you for um, allowing me to come on here. This is my first ever podcast interview, so I hope I didn't bore anyone, but you were great. This was incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think you also kind of like said it earlier that this is an amazing live stream. I just wanted to say it again just in case anyone missed it. But yeah, that's the show tonight. And I want to say a big shout out to Toyosi. She was there kind of like uh, giving you thumbs up throughout the whole entire live stream. This has been amazing. This is the show, everyone. Look forward to seeing you again next week. We have a double header. I think it's going to be great. One of our guests next week is kind of like she does amazing work helping people find resources. I think their program maybe a few months ago sponsored 120 or 200 candidates to actually get skills in like different Google certifications, and then we're going to have her on the live stream. We're always having people doing amazing work, sharing their journey, the tech transition journey. Today, it's Patricia sharing a journey from DEI work to project management uh, in a health tech startup. I hope our story and journey has inspired you as it has inspired me. And then I look forward to seeing you next week, Thursday, for another Working in Tech episode.